In this video, I will be determining how strong is Ghost Godzilla from the cancelled 1995 movie Godzilla vs. Ghost Godzilla. So back in the 90s, Toho was getting real creative with their ideas for future Godzilla movies. From having people shrink down and going inside Godzilla's body to stop him from exploding, an early concept for burning Godzilla, to Godzilla fighting monsters underwater, to Godzilla fighting a giant mobile AI-controlled city, basically Mechagodzilla City 23 years early, to even Godzilla fighting another Godzilla that had been mutated with even more radiation than what created the original Heisei Godzilla, dubbed Super Nuke Godzilla. I am not making this up. To Godzilla literally having to fight the ghost of the original Godzilla, which brings us to today's topic. The obvious reason for its cancellation is the running theme of the previous two movies, where Godzilla already had to fight another Godzilla-like opponent, that being the Heisei Mechagodzilla and Space Godzilla. Heck, one of the original proposed plans was to bring back Space Godzilla for a sequel movie. Now that would have really beat a dead horse. Before I go over Ghost Godzilla's strengths, I'm gonna go over the various story ideas they had for this, because unlike all the other proposed and cancelled stories, this one actually got as far as having multiple drafts written up. All of these sources come from the Japanese publication of the book Godzilla vs. Destroyer Perfection, though Wikizilla seems to have it listed as Godzilla vs. Destroyer Completion, released in 2017. Basically the book detailing all the cancelled ideas for what would eventually become Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Starting with the original movie proposal, apparently the oxygen destroyer that destroyed the original Godzilla in 1954 did more than what even Dr. Serizawa predicted. In truth, when it destroys oxygen, it actually sends the affected target 10,000 years into the future. So in truth, it wasn't just that Godzilla's oxygen molecules got destroyed, it basically just aged his body 10,000 years, which I guess puts a definite cap on how old this Godzilla could live, even though the basic belief was that this Godzilla was millions of years old, so 10,000 years should have been nothing to him. However, apparently Godzilla's life force lived on at the bottom of the Tokyo Bay. Fast forward 40-ish years later to 1995. In the universe, this would be 1996 because most of the Heisei movies take place 1 year after the year the movie actually came out. The residual energy eventually pieces itself back together, giving birth to Ghost Godzilla, an invisible presence seeking a body. In this invisible state, Ghost Godzilla is capable of causing bridges to suddenly collapse, buildings to crumble, the ground caves in, rivers reversing course, and the sky darkening even in broad daylight. Said to be the embodiment of the original Godzilla's rage and resentment towards humanity, he cannot be seen by the human eye, and seems to retain his intelligence from when he was alive. He comes across the 30-meter tall Little Godzilla, and possesses his body, forcefully stretching his body out and growing to an 80-meter height, which, as the pitch details, is combining Little Godzilla's height with the original Godzilla's height, forming 80 meters. This is the height he would be at in most versions of the draft, though apparently there's one draft that specifies that he'd actually be over 100 meters tall, making him taller than the Heisei Godzilla. His abilities are as follows: teleportation, levitation, the ability to phase through matter, typical ghost stuff, changing its form. The methods of attack include spraying forth his original atomic breath. He can spit ectoplasm to create duplicates of himself. He can alter the environment at will, such as temperature, wind, light, etc., and can take over his opponent's mind. In his possessed form of Little Godzilla, it's said to be similar to that of the original Godzilla, but more ferocious, having longer talons and fangs, and noted to be more demonic. And yet, as stated here, his height is 80 meters, with original Godzilla's height combined with Little Godzilla's height. When in danger, he'll take the form of Little Godzilla, which I guess causes Heisei Godzilla to hold back. Weaknesses include hating the daylight. His speed is said to be instantaneous, I guess that's mainly with the teleportation, but his biggest restriction is that he can only move within the range of the area in which his living body once moved. In other words, he can only go to places that he went to when he was alive, which I guess mainly includes Tokyo and the Tokyo Bay, as well as Odo Island. There's even a little section about his psychology, stating he has a strong sense of resentment towards humans, going out of his way to target individuals specifically. Okay, this is starting to sound a lot more like GMK Godzilla, and I'm starting to think that they might have inadvertently recycled the idea of Ghost Godzilla for GMK. Also, apparently Little Godzilla's kind heart may sometimes be able to take back control, stating that the two's mindsets are in constant conflict. Of course, the motivation for the main Heisei Godzilla in this battle is to save Little Godzilla, apparently attempting to exorcise Ghost Godzilla from Little's morphed body. And yeah, it specifically states that he would use the magical technique of exorcism, while Ghost Godzilla's main motivation is to just use Little Godzilla's body temporarily until it can possess Heisei Godzilla's body body and become all invincible. What's crazy is that by this logic, he would have actually formed the tallest Godzilla ever until Godzilla Earth came along. Unless we're counting Marvel Godzilla, of course, but his height's never consistent. It would have basically combined the height of the original Godzilla with Heisei Godzilla, forming a 150-meter tall Godzilla. Needless to say, this would have obviously created a Godzilla that might have possibly even given Burning Godzilla a run for his money in terms of power. When you consider that the last time Heisei Godzilla grew in height by 20 meters, he got a 200 times power boost. Now imagine how strong he would be after just fighting Space Godzilla, getting a 50% height increase. We're talking at the bare minimum like a 500 times multiplier. This would literally be like Heisei Godzilla post-Space Godzilla fight going to Super Saiyan 3 and beyond. Now that's all the information I've got from the original pitch, so let's go into the first serious developed draft, conceived by Kazuki Omori and Shogo Tomiyama. In this version, the original Godzilla skeleton still remains, already retconning what we see happen at the original movie, but then again, it wouldn't be the first movie to do this kind of retcon. Anyway, bones get excavated, and this of course stirs awake the ghost of the original Godzilla, who starts rampaging around Tokyo in the dead of night, completely invisible to the human eye, leaving claw marks on buildings, with people already referring to this incident as the ghost of the original Godzilla due to the similar damage inflicted. Eventually, Ghost Godzilla manifests in a visible form using Aurora Borealis. God, I miss that meme. He literally doesn't do nothing but just stand there over the ocean as ships pass through him, disappearing into a veil of light never to be seen again. The human characters then have the bright idea to send the pup to the wolves and send out Little Godzilla of all things to fight Ghost Godzilla, or in this case, Aurora Godzilla. It goes about as well as you'd expect for a baby trying to fight a ghost, and the ghost possesses Little Godzilla, mutating his body into a form more suitable for Godzilla. God, this is gonna get confusing. Let's just refer to the original as Ghost and refer to Heisei Godzilla as Heisei. Anyway, as Heisei's making his way to fight Ghost, this one human character unlocks the secret of Ghost Godzilla's origins by analyzing the recovered bone of Ghost, and basically decides the Oxygen Destroyer wasn't deadly enough of a weapon, so he's gonna create the Neo Oxygen Destroyer, capable of not only destroying physical matter, but destroying life energy as well, by creating and utilizing literal time force energy. And you thought time travel in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah was getting outlandish. Though I guess the whole premise of this, Godzilla fighting the ghost of a previous Godzilla, is just as outlandish. Anyway, soon a fight erupts between Ghost and Heisei, said to be destroying skyscrapers lining a waterfront. Despite Ghost using his supernatural abilities, such as being able to phase through matter, teleport, and even clone himself by spitting out ectoplasm, Heisei somehow emerges victorious, falls to the ground, and exits Little Godzilla's body, returning him to normal, but leaving him in a comatose state. Though this has Heisei Godzilla thinking that Little is dead. Anyway, despite Heisei actually defeating the evil Godzilla, the humans decide to repay his heroic efforts by dropping the Neo Oxygen Destroyer on him, killing him in an unceremonious fashion. Dick move, humans. Anyway, the bone remains of Ghost Godzilla soon shatter, and from the dust creates a new form, Crystal Godzilla, resembling a beautiful glass statue, said to be shining and transparent. Crystal Godzilla makes his way towards Japan. This is not to be confused with one of the early proposed versions of what would become Space Godzilla, but I'm gonna use this picture as a reference anyway, as well as other pictures I found that might fit. Anyway, Little Godzilla is eventually revived, and I guess in the ensuing explosion caused by Crystal Godzilla, this somehow causes Little Godzilla to become stronger, looking closer to the adult Heisei Godzilla, but still stated to be a younger version of his adopted father. After a fierce, lengthy showdown, the teenage Little Godzilla, we'll call him Godzilla Jr., manages to destroy Crystal Godzilla, shattering him into pieces, with the humans now wondering if this new powered version of Little Godzilla is friend or foe. This version of the Ghost Godzilla story is referred to as Story Plan 8, and sounds good on paper, except for how they decided to kill off Heisei Godzilla. I would have had him actually possess Heisei Godzilla after Heisei defeats Ghost Godzilla possessing Little Godzilla's body. And then they have to basically, revive Little Godzilla. He powers up to Godzilla Jr. and he has to somehow fight the possessed Heisei Godzilla, with him maybe only being saved in moments where he would have been killed by Heisei Godzilla briefly regaining control and holding his attacks back. Kind of like how apparently Little Godzilla was able to do in one of the drafts. And then instead, the humans have to use the Neo Oxygen Destroyer on the possessed Heisei Godzilla, killing both of them, with maybe Junior managing to hold off Ghost Godzilla long enough for the humans to deploy the weapon. Now see, that would have been a more fitting story, and I honestly think I would have enjoyed this movie more than Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, if only they came up with the idea a year earlier. But yeah, the collective minds of Toho just didn't seem to want to have a third Godzilla vs. Godzilla story in a row. There's a few more proposed story concepts involving Ghost Godzilla, so I'm just going to quickly go over them real quick. Another proposed idea was Godzilla vs. Baragiris, which would have featured a monster that was a cross between Baragon and Anguirus. Not to say that it's like a literal fusion, just that it's an original monster that just happens to be a fusion of their names, and I guess also just happens to be a fusion of their designs. Where Ghost Godzilla would have apparently possessed the creature at some point, and Godzilla would have to defeat this monster. Another idea would have had Godzilla facing off against a new original monster called Chaos, and apparently Little Godzilla in a three-way battle fighting over Ghost Godzilla's energy. Wikizilla also details a version called Godzilla vs. Godzilla, which, yeah, again, is another Ghost Godzilla story, but also features a version of Anguirus referred to as the Anguirus Hound, in addition to another Anguirus design concept that looks more close to the original. Finally, in the big book of Japanese giant monster movies, The Lost Films, there's a snippet for 1999 called Bio Godzilla, which would have had G-Force make the brilliant idea to create a new monster using the remains of Batra, Destroyer, and the Heisei Godzilla. Give these guys the Nobel Peace Prize. I want to know what idiot thought it was a good idea to bring back from the dead Destroyer and Heisei Godzilla and decide to fuse them together. Oh yeah, and the ghost of the original 1954 Godzilla manifests and starts attacking cities. Wow, this movie sounds like a horror film waiting to happen. Ghost Godzilla on top of a zombified Frankenstein Batra Heisei Destroyer hybrid. But it gets crazier. See, when Bio Godzilla inevitably goes on a rampage, Godzilla Jr. teams up with Ghost Godzilla to fight this Franken hybrid. However, the two biggest nails in the coffin for this idea, which would have spawned in 1997 and 1998-ish, was of course the disaster of the TriStar Godzilla movie, as well as a rumor someone started on Toho Kingdom claiming that the Cybersaur monster from the Dark Horse Godzilla comics would also be in it, which everyone called BS on and now started believing that the movie idea itself was baloney as well. And if there's anything else you take away from this video besides Ghost Godzilla almost being a thing in multiple planned movies no less, it's the idea of there being a super nuked Godzilla and a Frankenstein Godzilla Batra Destroyer hybrid. Well, I've already gone over the would-be history and I've already gone over all his abilities, but how physically strong would this Godzilla be with everything else? Well, going over his strengths, he would obviously, at the bare minimum, be as strong as his original living self. So, city, physically, island with atomic breath. But with Little Godzilla's body, and with this being Heisei logic, he would at least somewhat scale to Heisei Godzilla, his opponent. Though it should be noted that Heisei Godzilla did manage to overpower Ghost Godzilla when he was possessing Little's body, to the point where he even had to, in one version of the story, revert back to Little Godzilla just to get Heisei to ease off with the attacks. But being 80-meter height, I can see why some people might also say at the bare minimum he should be as strong as an early Heisei-era Godzilla. But at the bare minimum, he should be as strong as his original living counterpart, combined with the strength of Little Godzilla, which honestly wouldn't be too much, but then again, you know, 30 meters tall, that's still a heck of a lot taller and stronger than a typical Godzillasaurus. Highballed, I'd say he'd scaled to a weaker, earlier version of Heisei Godzilla, which would be in that large star to solar system level range. And if he at least somewhat scales in terms of speed, then he should be faster than light with attack speed, as well as, you know, the whole teleportation thing. Though I honestly think he's stronger without a body if he can just clone himself, phase through solid matter, and fire his atomic breath while still being in his ghostly form. Honestly, possessing Little Godzilla, sure, it gives him the ability to go wherever he wants in the world, but I feel like the weaknesses are too great. But yeah, even at his peak, he would still scale below a post-Space Godzilla Heisei. As for how strong he'd be as Crystal Godzilla, honestly, I'm not sure, but I mean, he did lose against the fresh Godzilla Jr., who was literally stated to just look like a younger Heisei Godzilla. So again, I think it's safe to say that this version of Jr. wouldn't be as strong as, again, a post-Space Godzilla Heisei. Of course, if we were to have the hypothetical bad ending where he somehow managed to possess Heisei, which again, I'm still confused on why he didn't do that after he gets exorcised fighting Heisei, or why he even didn't just try to possess Heisei Godzilla while fighting him. This hypothetical Heisei possessed Ghost Godzilla would have been 100% 150 meters tall, and like I said before, might have been just as strong as Burning Godzilla, but without his limit-breaking abilities such as the Infinite Heat Ray. As for how strong the Little Godzilla possessed Ghost Godzilla would fare compared to previous movie Heisei opponents, it's honestly hard to say. Against Space Godzilla, it's 50-50, especially when you take into account Space Godzilla's Crystal Fortress Amp, but given that he was at least able to put up a fight against a post-Cosmic Energy, post-Space Godzilla fight Heisei, I'd say he'd be at least comparable to Heisei at the start of the Space Godzilla movie, who would be above Super Mecha Godzilla and everyone that came before. In any case, Ghost Godzilla in his various possible possession forms, and heck, even his crystal form, sounds like a really fun concept. And like I said, I think this would have been a more perfect movie idea than the Space Godzilla movie. If only they came up with the idea a year sooner. That's not to say I don't like Space Godzilla. I do love Space Godzilla. I think he's got some pretty crazy abilities, but so does Ghost Godzilla too. Well, at least we can all take comfort in the fact that it seems pretty much confirmed that he lived on in the form of GMK Godzilla. You cannot tell me that they did not borrow elements of Ghost Godzilla for GMK. GMK is probably what Ghost Godzilla wishes he was, minus the obvious gap in power between the GMK movie and the Heisei movies. Unless you consider a certain comic that came out earlier this year, in which case GMK would actually become one of the strongest Godzillas in all of fiction. But that's a topic for another video. I hope you enjoyed this video, folks. Stay tuned for the next Power Scaling Godzilla video, which will hopefully be part 2 of the Monsterverse. I hope you look forward to that. Take care.